Today we will discuss extrinsic aids of construction. Before anything else, just a disclaimer, the individual behind this YouTube channel is a law student. This is not an attempt to present himself as an expert in the field, but merely an effort to share his knowledge of statutory construction based on what he learns and understands in his study of law. This lecture is merely a supplement to your study of this subject. It does not seek to replace your reading materials or contradict what your professors have discussed with you. Statutes are not enacted in a vacuum, and the external circumstances under which the statute is passed can help in the determination of legislative intent. In this subject, we should always keep in mind that everything happens for a reason. The existence of a particular law did not happen for nothing. The laws that we read, they are there because there were circumstances back then that pushed our lawmakers to craft that particular law. Remember, under the Constitution, the duty of the government is to serve and protect the people. We therefore presume that the laws that we read, they are there to serve and protect us. Extrinsic matters may be considered by the court in determining the meaning of the statute after all intrinsic aids have been exhausted and the meaning of the statute is still in doubt. We discussed as early as chapter 1 the difference between construction and interpretation. That lecture should already serve as a guide for us to better understand why we have this intrinsic, why we have this extrinsic aids. Diba? When we say interpretation, the courts are only using intrinsic aids or those found in the statute itself. When we say construction, the courts will use extrinsic aids, or in other words, when we say construction, the courts go beyond the written language of the law. If the language of a statute is plain, it is neither necessary nor permissible to use extrinsic aids. So always go back to a cardinal rule in statutory construction. When the language of the law is clear, there is no need for construction. In other words, we will give the law its plain and ordinary meaning. Therefore, there will be no reason for the courts to employ extrinsic aids. So let's have an illustrative case. In the case of People versus Munoz, here the question hinges on whether death penalty is totally abolished by the Constitution. Abolish means wala na talaga, bawal na talaga. In resolving, the court did not bother to use extrinsic aids. Why? Because the language of the Constitution is clear. Maliwanag pa sa sikat ng araw. If you read the provision, it's actually self-explanatory. You can read it like this. As a general rule, death penalty should not be imposed unless there are compelling reasons. Simple as that. So, the Supreme Court said, no. The language, while rather awkward, is plain enough. And it is a settled rule of legal hermeneutics that if the language under consideration is plain, it is neither necessary nor permissible to resort to extrinsic aids like the records of the Constitutional Convention for its interpretation. So the courts are not allowed to use extrinsic aids when the language of the law is clear. So what exactly are extrinsic aids? From the term aids, it means these are the tools that the courts can employ to better construe the law. They are tools of construction, in other words. So we have legislative deliberations, legislative history, contemporaneous circumstances, legislative practice, reference to other statutes, statutes borrowed from foreign jurisdictions. So let's go to legislative deliberations. What are these legislative deliberations? These are the debates of the members of Congress, whether in a committee, in a plenary session, or during a bicameral conference. So, we discussed already the legislative process in the Philippines. How does a bill becomes a law? That was discussed in chapter 2. So, we discussed that one of the processes was debate. It's in these debates where the intent of the lawmaker is revealed. Of course, if you are a lawmaker, you will not create a bill without any purpose. You will also not create a bill without discussing the technical terms employed therein. Even during the bicameral conferences, where they reconcile conflicting provisions of the bill, the intent of the law can be revealed. The meaning put forth in a provision during a legislative deliberation may be adopted in case of doubt as to what such provision means. In fact, when you read Supreme Court decisions, of course, in their full text, you will often see direct quotations from legislative records as to the debates or deliberations. Why? Because those are essential in ascertaining the intent of the legislature. In most cases, when a term is ambiguous or can be subjected to two or more interpretations, the court will look into the meaning of those technical terms. Titingnan nila paano ba diniscuss ang terms na iyon during legislative deliberations. Second, we have legislative history. It is the historical background of the law. The courts may take judicial notice of the origin and history of the law, the deliberations during its enactment, as well as prior laws on the same subject matter to ascertain the true intent or spirit of the law. What is judicial notice? Meaning, the court will take it as it is without the necessity of providing evidence. For example, when the court relies on the historical background to interpret a law. Let's say, based on the records, is it still necessary that you present evidence such as the publication of previous laws, the testimony of the senators or congressmen, the papers used in the deliberation? Not anymore, since there is already a record of everything that is happening. The court will take judicial notice of the same. To better understand this principle, let's have an illustrative case. So we have the case of Commissioner of Customs versus ESO Standard Eastern Incorporated. I still encourage you to read the full text of the decision. Albeit it is short, it is quite technical. So here we have two laws in question. If you will notice the highlighted phrases, the first one says free of customs. Okay? While on the other hand, the second law imposes special import tax. So what did the petitioner do? They imported machinery, equipment, materials, etc., claiming that they are exempted under Republic Act 387. However, the collector of customs assessed the special import tax under Republic Act 1394. So who is correct? So here is the question, whether or not the exempt status under Petroleum Act cover the special import tax under the special tax law. So the court said yes. So you can just read this ruling part, but the point really of this case is that the court emphasized that the primary source for legislative intent is the statute itself. But when the statute, viewed as a whole, is ambiguous or unclear, the court may look into extrinsic aids, such as the origin and history of its enactment, the reasons for its passage, and the purpose to be accomplished. So, we have already talked about this earlier. The first step is the text of the statute itself. If it is still ambiguous, then resorting to extrinsic aids or those found outside of the statute is proper. Also, in this case, the court looked into the history of enactment. It recognized that the exemption under Republic Act 387 was intended as an incentive for the concessionaire or private sector, which is to invest in petroleum exploitation, exploration, and development. So these were the areas that the state lacked sufficient capital or technology. Therefore, giving tax privileges was part of the government's economic policy. See, the Supreme Court took judicial notice of the legislative history, reasons for its enactment, and prior laws and policies to discern the true intent or spirit underlying Republic Act 387 and its relationship with Republic Act 1394. So that's how you appreciate the doctrine that we earlier mentioned. Again, I still encourage you to read the full text of this case because it is quite technical. Next, we have contemporaneous circumstances. These are the environment existing at the time of the passage of the law. Here, the courts are looking into the very reason why we have this law. Ano ba ang dahilan ng Kongreso sa paggawa ng batas na ito? What was the situation back then when they enacted the law? What was the environment? So those are the questions that contemporaneous circumstances will answer. The context of the passage of a statute, which explains why the legislature decided to act, can help a judge interpret a statute. Later on, we will have illustrative cases for this. It is logical to assume in a democracy that the needs and desires of the people will find expression in the enactments of the legislatures consisting of representatives of the people. In a democratic state like the Philippines, sovereignty resides on the people and all government authority emanates from them. That's under Article 2 of the Constitution, meaning the power actually resides on us. Nasa atin ang kapangyarihan. And then, through elections, we delegated this power to the lawmakers. That's why they are called representatives of the people, because they represent us. Sa madaling sabi, since the lawmakers represents the people, it is but natural that they enact laws that will carry out the desires of the people and not the other way around. I hope you remember this concept in your political law subjects. So, this is a relevant maxim. The contemporary construction is the strongest law. So let's have an illustrative case. We have the case of CIR versus Caltex Incorporated. So in this case, the law in question was Republic Act 387, specifically Article 103. In this case, Caltex was granted by the Secretary of Agriculture and Natural Resources a petroleum refining concession. Okay? Now, Caltex imported petroleum products to be used during the construction of a refinery. Now, Caltex claimed exception from custom duties on those imported petroleum products. So what was the basis of Caltex? It was Article 103 of Republic Act 387. Basically, Caltex is saying that during the first 5 years following the grant of concession, the concessionaire may import equipment, machinery, material, instruments, supplies, and accessories duty-free. So, the issue is whether or not Caltex can claim exemption from custom duties on those imported petroleum products. So, what was the ruling of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court said yes. So, you can just read this portion of the decision. So, ano ba sinasabi basically ng Supreme Court dito? The Supreme Court actually looked into the conditions existing at the time of the enactment of the law. They found out that at the time Republic Act 387 was passed, there was no local production of crude oil in the Philippines. Ang sinasabi kasi ng Commissioner of Customs dito, Caltex should not be allowed to claim tax exemption under Article 103 of Republic Act 387 because, according to the Commissioner, the exemption, as enunciated in the law, is applied only to concessionaires refining domestic crude petroleum. Pero, sabi ng Supreme Court, teka muna, during the time that Republic Act 387 was enacted, wala ngang local production of crude oil in the Philippines. So what is the purpose of the tax exemption then if we interpret the law that way? So the Supreme Court said the exemption must be understood in light of the actual situation when the law was made, so that the purpose of the law, which is to promote refinery construction and development, can be fulfilled. So this is one of the situations wherein the conditions or circumstances at the time of the statute was enacted can shed light to the proper construction of the same. So let's have another illustrative case. In the case of Lagman versus Medialdea, this case involves the declaration of martial law and the suspension of the privilege of a writ of habeas corpus in the whole of Mindanao by former President Duterte under Proclamation number 216. The petitioners question the accuracy and correctness of the basis cited by the President pursuant to Article 7, Section 18 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So that provision states in part that the Supreme Court may review in an appropriate proceeding filed by any citizen the sufficiency of the factual basis of the proclamation of martial law or the suspension of the privilege of the writ or the extension thereof and must promulgate its decision thereon within 30 days from its filing. So here, this involves the proclamation of martial law. So the reason of former President Duterte for declaring martial law was that for decades, Mindanao has been plagued with rebellion as well as lawless violence. So, according to the president, this only escalated and worsened with the passing of time. Now, here comes the petitioner. They are now contending that the declaration of martial law has no sufficient factual basis because there is no rebellion or invasion in Marawi City or any part of the Mindanao. That is why we have this case. The petitioners are saying that the Supreme Court may validly review the sufficiency of the factual basis of the proclamation. I hope you read this case in full text because this is very important. You need to have basic knowledge with regard to martial law because in every administration, kahit sino pa yan, posible ang martial law. Why? For the simple reason that the president has the power to proclaim the same. Now, in relation to our topic, statutory construction, are the petitioners correct? The Supreme Court said no. To recall, the court in the case of in the matter of the petition for habeas corpus of Lansang, which was decided under the 1935 Constitution, held that it can inquire into, within proper bounds, whether there has been adherence to or compliance with the constitutionally imposed limitations on the presidential power to suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. Lansang limited the review function of the court to a very prudentially narrow test of arbitrariness. So the petitioners are wrong. Why? Because what the petitioner wants in this case is for the Supreme Court to review the President's determination of rebellion and lawless violence. Again, the very determination of the President. Now, why are the petitioners wrong? According to the Supreme Court, their power of judicial review in this case must be exercised in compliance with the constitutionally imposed limitations. What are those constitutionally imposed limitations? the narrow test of arbitrariness. So I need not discuss that here because I will leave it to your constitutional law professor. But the point of this limitation is that the court is limited to determining whether or not the president did proclaim martial law under the impression that there was rebellion or lawless violence. So the courts are not allowed to determine the wisdom of the president as to why he thinks a particular circumstance warrants the proclamation. I hope I am making myself clear. According to the Supreme Court, under the doctrine of contemporaneous construction, the framers of the 1987 Constitution are presumed to know the prevailing jurisprudence at the time they were drafting the Constitution. Thus, the phrase sufficiency of factual basis in Section 18, Article 7 of the Constitution should be understood as the only test for judicial review of the President's power to declare martial law and suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus under Section 18, Article 7 of the Constitution. The court does not need to satisfy itself that the President's decision is correct. Rather, it only needs to determine whether the President's decision had sufficient factual basis. We conclude, therefore, that Section 18, Article 7 limits the scope of judicial review by the introduction of the sufficiency of the factual basis test. So, what is the point here? Before the 1987 Constitution was drafted, there was a landmark case. That case is the case of in the matter of the petition for habeas corpus of Lansang. So that was the case that I have mentioned earlier, and I hope you read that case. In that ruling, that's where the Supreme Court hinted the narrow test of arbitrariness. During that time, what was the effective constitution? It was the 1935 Constitution. After that, we had 1973 Constitution. Then after that, we have 1987 Constitution. So, the Supreme Court in Lagman versus Medialdea said that when the framers of the Constitution were drafting the 1987 Constitution, they have in their mind the narrow test of arbitrariness in view of the landmark case of Lansang. Sa madaling sabi, the court confirmed here that the application of contemporaneous circumstances extends not only to factual circumstances at the time of the enactment of the statute, but also to the legal circumstances at the time. So that's how you appreciate the application of contemporaneous construction. That's why being a lawmaker or a framer of a constitution is a big responsibility. You have to be knowledgeable of all the laws and all the decisions of the Supreme Court because all of these laws, all of these decisions will be essential in resolving doubts in the future. Next, we have legislative practice reference to other statutes. To understand this doctrine, let's have the illustrative case of Escosura versus San Miguel Brewery Incorporated. In this case, the facts are as follows. At various times during their employment, the employees of SMBI fell ill and were confined in the hospital for treatment. For the duration of their confinement, they were given by SMBI sick leave pay to the extent of 50%. Okay, take note 50% of their wages for the first 3 days and 75% of their wages thereafter, pursuant to SMBI's Health, Welfare, and Retirement Plan. Such receipt of sick leaves pay notwithstanding, the employees claimed sickness benefits under the Social Security Act. So take note of the bolded phrases here. What did the petitioners receive? 50% and 75% of their wages. In other words, mas mababa, okay? Mas mababa sa usual nilang sahod. Now, the petitioners are saying that they are entitled to the sickness benefits under the Social Security Act because according to them, such law allows them to receive allowances if the sick leave pay is less than the full wage. Di ba sabi natin kanina, 50% and 75% of their usual salary. So mas mababa sa usual nilang sahod. That is why they are saying that they are entitled. However, the San Miguel is saying otherwise. Okay, according to San Miguel, having received sick leave pay, the petitioners can no longer claim benefits under the Social Security Act. Specifically, San Miguel is saying that the clause before all leaves of absence with pay shall have been exhausted precludes the employees from invoking the benefits of the Social Security Act since they have been paid their sick leave pay. Sabi ni San Miguel, the fact that the petitioners receive their sick leave pay, they are already precluded from receiving benefits under the Social Security Act. Why? Because the law used pay and not full. So I hope you take note of the law in question in this case. So let's go to the issue. So the issue is, are the petitioners entitled to additional sickness benefit allowances under the Social Security Act, notwithstanding that they had already received sick leave pay from their employer? So the issue actually hinges on the term pay under the Social Security Act. So the Supreme Court said yes. So you can just read this portion of the ruling. Basically, the Supreme Court is saying that the petitioners are entitled. In other words, the court is saying here that the law only uses the term full when there is a need to distinguish between full and half pay. Okay? So here, no situation necessitates the distinction of full and half pay. I hope you are getting the point. But that's actually quite technical. Okay? But the point really of this doctrine, for purposes of statutory construction, as your law school subject, is that legislative practice, insofar as giving meaning to the words is concerned, can be used to help the courts ascertain the intent of the legislature. So let's go to statutes borrowed from foreign jurisdiction. Where a statute of a foreign jurisdiction that receive a settled judicial construction in such foreign jurisdiction is adopted in its entirety or partially in the Philippines, it is presumed that the construction previously put upon such statute is likewise adopted and should be interpreted following such construction. The legislature should be considered as having adopted the judicial interpretation already made in the foreign jurisdiction at the time the statute was adopted in the Philippines and does not necessarily include the judicial interpretations in foreign jurisdictions made after, take note of that, after the statute is adopted in the Philippines. So actually, if you are a first year law student, it would really be challenging for you to think of a situation where this principle applies. But the most illustrative case that I can find is the case of Republic versus Del Monte Motors. So this is actually an insurance law case. So what is the principle of this case? So here is the doctrine. According to the Supreme Court, our insurance code is patterned after that of California. Thus, the ruling of the state's Supreme Court, which is the California's Supreme Court, on a similar concept as that of the security deposit is instructive. Okay, so I do not have to discuss here the technicalities of insurance law since our subject now is statutory construction. But you can read this case by yourself. So here, there was a question as to the security deposit under our insurance code. Now, how did the Supreme Court decide? It held that our insurance code in the Philippines is patterned after that of California. Meaning, kung anong sinabi ng Korte Suprema ng California vis-a-vis security deposit, yun din ang controlling dito sa Pilipinas. Why? Because when our lawmakers crafted the insurance code, they are deemed to have adopted the judicial interpretation of the security deposit existing in California state. Now, what if, let's have a different situation. What if, after the Philippine Supreme Court decided in this case, the Supreme Court of California reversed its decision? Will the Philippine Supreme Court also reverse its decision? Not anymore. Why? In the previous slide, we said that it does not necessarily include judicial interpretations in foreign jurisdiction made after, okay, take note of the word after the statute is adopted in the Philippines. So that's how you appreciate this doctrine. So let's go to the last topic for this chapter. We have preference. There are three major approaches in the construction of statutes. First, the determination of meaning exclusively from the words used in the statute. Second, use of canons or rules of construction, as well as resort to legislative policies or approaches in the interpretation of certain types of statutes. And third, we have use of extrinsic aids or materials which are found outside of the four corners of the statute. But then again, does the court have any preference between intrinsic aids and extrinsic aids of construction? There is none. Why? We always go back to our discussion in chapter 1. Statutory construction is not an exact science. It is an art or process of discovering the legislative intent. In other words, the courts can validly employ both aids, whether intrinsic or extrinsic, in order to achieve the objective of statutory construction, which is to ascertain and give effect to the intent of the legislature. That would be all. Thank you for listening. Please know that I am always thankful for your support. Maraming salamat, and may your love for the law remain strong as always.